Hi, I'm J.Hooper, and I'm a PhD candidate in Anthrozoology, researching civets and the commodification of wildlife.
Hi, my name is K.Hill, and I'm doing my PhD with Exeter University, looking at cat-human relations and discourses surrounding free roam in urban cats.
Hi, I'm M.Szydlowski, Assistant Professor at Beacon College in Leesburg, Florida. My research focuses on captive elephant health and welfare and human-elephant relations in Nepal.
Hi, I'm S.Oxley Heaney. I'm a PhD student studying the unique shark-human interactions of shark listeners at the University of Exeter. I'm also interested in abandoned animals in Saudi Arabia, which I research for my MA in Anthrozoology.
Anthrozoology is an emergent field concerned with the study of human interactions and relationships with other than human animals. For anthrozoologists, research involves both human and other than human animals as active participants and actors within multi-species investigations. Concerned with the ethical implications of research beyond the human-animal pieces, we are often faced with navigating how to protect the interests of other than human animals, both in relation to the collection of data and in the dissemination of results.
Here we posit key questions regarding the ethics of other than human animal privacy. How is other than human animal privacy impacted by observational research? How can researchers obtain informed consent from their other than human participants? How can other than human animal privacy be protected during ethnographic investigation? And to what extent are researchers obliged to protect the privacy of their other than human research participants post-observations?
Acknowledgement of other than human animal cognitive capacities, from tool use to culture, have succeeded in undermining the long-held and misguided belief in human exceptionalism. Yet, despite the positive implications of such findings, to varying degrees, our increased understanding of other than human animal lives has been achieved through research which has relied upon the infringement of other than human animal privacy.
This presentation emerged from a larger project which sought to problematize the ethics review process from the perspective of social scientists whose research involves other than human animals. Here we examine the concept of privacy and what this might mean to non-human participants, along with the dilemmas researchers encounter while conducting fieldwork or disseminating their research findings. Adam Moore describes two types of privacy: bodily and informational. The former refers to the moral right of a person to control access to their own body, capacities, and powers. The latter relates to personal information about oneself. While privacy is generally recognized as being essential to human liberty, the precise definition, legality, and ethics of privacy are highly contested. Speaking exclusively for humans, Moore claims privacy, whether physical or informational, is valuable for beings like us.
But what then of other than human animals? Does lack of awareness render the concept of privacy void? For example, small children or even deceased persons may not understand privacy or feel adversely affected by non-consensual sharing of their intimate life details. Should privacy be respected regardless of whether or not the individual is or can become aware that they are being observed or displayed?
For contemporary human societies, the idea of privacy is embedded in the notion of private and public spaces, with the home typically being a private place. However, the homes of wild animals are rarely afforded privacy from humans who wish to study or observe them. Zoo other than human animals are subject to the visitor's gaze and keeper surveillance. Likewise, working other than human animals and even companion animals are rarely afforded agency in regard to privacy. There are many examples of other than human privacy being invaded.
Scenarios where it might be in the other than human animal's best interest could include veterinary surveillance or protection of an endangered population. But how does this concept of other than human animal privacy relate specifically to research? Here we look at some examples researchers may encounter whilst collecting data or disseminating their results.
Today, research in both in situ and ex situ environments is widely supported for the promotion of conservation efforts. Yet the revoked privacy of other than human animals enrolled in conservation efforts is highlighted by the wealth of published literature and millions of data entries held within global databases of zoological record systems. Indeed, while Foucaultian biopolitics can more readily be applied to the panoptic enclosure designs of the Victorian zoo era, The frequent monitoring of individual other than human animal health continues to wield political control through bodily surveillance.
And where some other than human animals may regain their privacy by electing to leave the view of onlookers, for many, the inability to escape observation can result in what Gunther describes as animal resistance, the expression of stereotypic behavior to cope with stress, stress which can be induced by the oppressive and dominating onlooker gaze. For others, however, the neglect to afford total privacy to other than human animals is a much more contested issue than is possible to alleviate through the object of conservation. For example, authors such as Randy Malamud condemn zoos as a form of spectatorship, describing them as a macabre opportunity to see the last surviving specimens. Although directed at the entertainment value of zoos, views such as this serves to encourage greater awareness of the implications of limiting other than human animal privacy during other activities such as work and indeed research. For even when our efforts intend to advocate for more ethical interspecies relations, we must consider the infringement upon other than human animal privacy required by their participation.
One way that other than human research participants are overlooked is in the research ethics review process that takes place in universities and research institutions. This approval process is quite clear that participant information forms must be offered, and either written or verbal informed consent must be obtained from all human participants. For humans unable to provide informed consent, researchers are subjected to an even more rigorous review process to justify the necessity of such research and gain approval from caregivers. However, the process is eerily silent on obtaining consent from other than human participants. Negotiating consent from those with whom we don't share a language is difficult enough, but how can we gain permission to enter the homes and lives of other than human animals?
Researchers attempting to interact with species other than their own perhaps should consider the need to first gain a working knowledge of the biology, needs, and communication preferences of their target species. Some species, such as reptiles, may prove harder for humans to understand thanks to their taxonomic distance from Homo sapiens. However, as Duvall points out, there certainly must be ways to seek consent from other than human animals who share similar social lives to ours, such as non-human primates or elephants.
Research involving companion animals typically seeks informed consent from the companion animal's guardian. This is similar to parents or guardians providing permission for the involvement of very young children or babies in research projects. While companion animal guardians typically have their companion's best interest at heart, the agency of an adult other than human animal may be overlooked by an inexperienced or insensitive researcher. Can we ensure a hissing cat is given the same space as a screaming child who is clearly not happy with the situation or the researcher's presence? Furthermore, when it comes to participant anonymization, the emphasis tends to focus on the protection of the human caregiver's identity. Even when a non-human is anonymized, it is often done primarily to prevent the identification of the humans.
De Waal suggests that we begin by watching how individuals interact with their environment, which may offer insight into their personal drives and desires. By observing body language, we may gain insight into signifiers of emotions, as individuals respond to social situations, stresses, and pleasurable experiences. How these individuals retain control of their emotions or fail to do so may be indicative of their cognitive state. Therefore, it appears that gaining embodied knowledge of one's other than human animal informants, much as one might during participant observations with humans, is an important first step in gaining consent. For example, to obtain consent from captive elephants, especially with regards to their right of bodily privacy, one first needs knowledge of how individuals perceive their environment or incursions into their personal space.
Captive elephants, some tourism facilities, for example, regularly have their bodily privacy interfered with through the human imposition of saddles, chains, and ropes. Rather than worrying about crossing man-made boundaries, such as stable fences with the permission only of the human resident, perhaps researchers should instead concern themselves with seeking consent from the elephants themselves.
How might this request for consent proceed, especially when approaching an elephant with little control over her daily activities? One way to do so might be by allowing these elephants to first experience the researcher via sound, then smell, then sight and physical contact. It is unlikely that researchers would approach a human participant without first announcing themselves, and thus it seems reasonable to follow suit with pachyderm participants. Research by McComb et al. Demonstrates that elephants use infrasonic sounds to communicate across distances and recognize another's voice over a kilometer away. It is not unrealistic, then, that they also have experience sensing human communications upon approach. Elephants also have an excellent sense of smell, which can detect water over 19 kilometers away. Furthermore, elephants are extremely tactile beings. Denhart et al. Showed that elephants use their entire body surface to interact with their environment and conspecifics, and that their trunk is sensitive enough to identify differences of a 1/4 millimeter of pressure. Seeking pachyderm consent, therefore, might involve speaking upon approach, standing outside an elephant's private stable area and waiting for the elephant to approach and initiate physical contact. Of course, this type of consent seeking is not without physical risks to the researcher if consent is not given. Working with human participants is not free of this risk either. While we have used elephants as an example here, the same type of embodied knowledge is needed for a wide range of species. Researchers seeking consent from spiders, for example, might be well advised to understand arachnids' hypersensitivity to vibration or touch. Those hoping to observe whales should certainly consider the impacts of engines on infrasound receptors, and those seeking consent from rats might be wise to avoid chemical or fragrance-laced hygiene products, which might overwhelm such sensitive noses. A further consideration should be the research encounter space within which the research is to be conducted. Is the other than human research participant captive with limited options to consent or refuse participation? Or is the research conducted with non-captive, other than human participants in their own Umwelt? In the latter, consent to participate may be more obvious, especially if the researcher is apparent to the other than human participant, rather than simply being an observer.
While the collection of data brings into question ethical considerations, such as how to gain informed consent from other than human animals, it is perhaps the dissemination of data where the greatest unintentional harm can be created. Traditionally, when biologists publish research, their results display geolocation information to authenticate results. However, this publishing culture disseminates unconsented other than human animal privacy locations, which, as noted by Lindenmayer and Scheel, exposes other than human animal individuals to being rapidly targeted and harvested by those wishing to benefit from the discovery of new species. Wildlife smugglers, traders, poachers, and collectors, they say, are known to track academic publications for location information on new species. Lindenmayer and Scheel further discuss the trust broken between researchers and landowners of the geolocations given. Questions are raised as to why this tradition, which affects living other than human animals, remains when researchers such as paleontologists and archaeologists withhold geolocation data for the remains of deceased other than human animals, as authors remain predominantly silent concerning such dissemination. It could be argued that living other than human animals are thus not considered as true research participants, interlocutors, or subjective participants, but simply as objects of research.
Equally problematic is the way in which researchers represent themselves within the dissemination of their findings. Pierce and Moscardo stress how selfies with wild animals are known to cause significant ethical issues for animal welfare and conservation. And Ross, Riemann, and Lostoff show how images of wildlife shown in the company of humans can lead to viewers believing such animals make suitable pets. Thus, researchers can unwittingly promote the exotic pet trade.
Similarly, social media platforms such as Facebook have begun to cover up photos by algorithms that are deemed to violate community standards. Such violations include imagery of other than human animals in various states of physical wounding, and this use of imagery showing such suffering is contested. Some may argue that images of other than human animal suffering represent a form of privacy invasion described as misery pimping. Misery pimping, Haynes and Thornton, and Swim and Bloodhart argue, is when images of sad, abandoned, injured, suffering, or deceased other than human animals are used to promote feelings of worry and guilt in humans. These feelings, they say, can result in higher monetary donations and greater levels of support for other than human animal related causes, making them widely used in causes related to other than human animal welfare.
Alternatively, it may be argued that such images are a form of witnessing. Witnessing has been engaged by various authors to highlight both the normalized and unrepentant violence brought to bear upon other than human animals. Gillespie exposes the embodied experiences of the emotional and physical world of farmed cows, while Lockwood discusses how bearing witness can be engaged in a form of academic activism. Privacy in these instances, while being of clandestine benefit to those bringing violence to bear on other than human animals, would not be of benefit to those very other than human animals whose experiences would go unexposed, undiscussed, and undisclosed. Any privacy violation in such circumstances could be described as what Catherine Gillespie terms witnessing as politics, or as Dave refers to, as a means of giving voice to those bearing violence. There is a space for discourse regarding the nuances of confidentiality, privacy, and witnessing surrounding other than human animals, which carries an imperative to be explored.
Numerous species now serve as active participants within both biological and sociological research, greatly enriching the data being collected. However, as we have demonstrated, the research ethics review process has not kept pace with privacy concerns surrounding other than human animals. It is our hope that by problematizing the process here, we will encourage researchers and ethics committees to consider both the bodily and informational privacy needs of other than human animal participants. Respecting the privacy of animal bodies is one step towards recognizing them as ethically significant beings with agency.
Elisa Altola asserts that the concept of privacy is tied to that of dignity, which is why the privacy of deceased humans is often respected. Brett Mills claims that granting the right to privacy to humans while disavowing other species reveals such rights are a form of speciesism that allows humans to maintain their dominance. As both co-creators of meaning and sources of valuable data, we believe these other than human animals should merit the same consideration offered our human participants.